cure for sickle cell appears to be close at hand. That's good news because about 1 in 13 black or African American babies is born with a sickle cell trait, and often their parents don't know. And that's only the trait. 1 in 100,000 black Americans are born with full-blown sickle cell disease, which leads to a painful life and early death. If you're having sex with someone, whether it's casual or in a committed or married relationship, what should you be aware of? William Mollett, one of my 3 guests, is a sickle cell and genetic counselor. 2 persons, 2 ladies who have this painful disease will be joining me to also tell their stories. Mr. Mollett, first of all, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you, and I appreciate very much being here with you.
What drove me crazy is that African Americans are hardest hit by this disease. Explain that to me.
Well, with sickle cell disease, we understand that the gene that leads to the disease or the trait conditions arise as an evolutionary adaptation to malaria. And malaria is present in certain parts of the world all the time. It's endemic. It's throughout the northern hemisphere in Africa as well as the southern hemisphere in Africa. Both sides of the equator are populated. Therefore, both sides are subtropic or tropic in environment. And wherever you find that environment, you will find sickle cell disease and you will find malaria. So the malaria is the incident, and we evolved as human beings. We evolved a way to combat malaria. So persons with a sickle cell trait condition survive malaria. They get stronger over time in their youth, and then they live to become adults who then pass on their genes and have children. What sickle cell disease does is, well, what malaria does is it infects children and they die from malaria. The disease can affect people throughout their lifetime, and typically in certain parts of Africa, young children born with the disease will die as a result of sickle cell disease. So what you have is evolutionary pressure, losing population to the disease and losing population to malaria leaves the people with sickle cell trait alive. So in parts of Africa and Central South America, around the world in a certain band, just north and just south of the equator, you find a lot of population living with sickle cell trait. 2 people with the trait combine for a pregnancy, and then you have the risk, 1 chance out of 4, of sickle cell disease. And that's what's underlying, that's the math behind why so many people that are black people, because we are descendants of populations from Africa, as well as Central South America and the Middle East and certain parts of India as well. That's where you find these evolutionary adaptations. The sickle gene, the type C gene, and the thalassaemic gene, all of which contribute to populations surviving malaria, which is a very vile disease.
So let's bring it here now to the United States. I know some people in Brooklyn, and we are joined by some people here in New York as well, who have sickle cell disease. Now, you talked a bit about Africa.
Yes.
Now bring it home.
Bring it home to Brooklyn.
Yes.
There are lots and lots of our population here in New York City overall, and in Brooklyn, and in areas of Queens and the Bronx, as well as Harlem, where you have populations that reflect the populations from around the planet that have a high incident of sickle cell disease. So here in Brooklyn and nearby in Queens, we have a lot of people from the Caribbean, a lot of people who are descendants of Africans here in the United States, and then we have immigrant African populations as well as East Indian and South and Central American populations. So all of those populations converge in New York. And we have lots and lots of people that are carrying these sickle genes and these other hemoglobin variation genes, and they have children, and those children are born with the disease in that same mathematical ratio, 1 out of 4. Doesn't mean that they have to have 4 children to have 1 child with the disease, but the mathematical chance each time they become pregnant when both mom and dad each have a trait is 1 out of 4 each time they have a pregnancy.
1 out of 4.
It's a 1 out of 4 chance.
That's high.
That's a high 25% risk with every pregnancy from a carrier couple.
From a carrier couple, as opposed to one person in the couple who has a trait,
Right.
and another person who's got the disease.
Well, that we don't, numerically, we don't see that often. What you do find is that people with a trait, where mom has a trait, dad has a trait, we call that a carrier couple, because they each carry that gene. From there, people with sickle cell disease are usually acutely aware of the consequence of having children with someone else that also has one of these genes. So they tend to prefer to find someone who does not have sickle cell trait at all, is normal, what we call hemoglobin AA, and therefore their children can only be born with a trait which is healthier.
What happens if the person has a trait and don't know?
Well, that's our biggest challenge in the public health and health education arena, is that most people living with trait don't have a clue that they have trait. Now, we've made tremendous progress in getting word out about sickle cell trait, but right now we don't have a big public health initiative to really promote the concept of knowing your hemoglobin status.
Let's talk a bit about the pain.
Yes. Sickle cell disease.
I mean, not talking about death yet, because I have some friends whose children died from sickle cell disease.
Yes. With respect to pain, pain is the top manifesting symptom of all folks living with sickle cell disease. It's the most common symptom. The reason why is because what sickle cell disease is a change in the gene that leads to how we produce red blood cells. We know we have blood. We know there are thousands or many different things in our blood, each of which has a goal to produce some health benefit to our well-being. The red blood cell in particular is the part of our body that collects the oxygen that we breathe into our lungs and then circulates that oxygen throughout the entire body. For a person with sickle cell disease, the change is such that those cells can change from a round, flexible, strong, and durable cell to an irregular shape, pointy-ended, rigid, and fragile cell. When it gets into that sickled shape, it can clog blood vessels in the body, stopping the flow of oxygen delivery to any point in your body, whether that is the brain, which leads to a stroke, the heart, which leads to a heart attack, or it can even occur in the lungs and cause acute chest syndrome. It can occur in the skin, it can occur in muscles, but muscles are generally where these pain crises tend to come from. When it blocks blood flow to a muscle group or something, or some area of the body, your brain recognizes that that part of the body is dying because it's not receiving a constant flow of oxygen. Without that oxygen, there will be pain.
Medications that are available.
There are plenty of different medications that are currently available to treat pain. But as you know, to treat pain, not to treat sickle cell disease, but to treat pain, because it is the major symptom of sickle cell disease. As you know, the opioid epidemic in the country has led to doctors being a lot more careful and a little bit more hesitant in prescribing pain medication because of the concerns with addiction. In fact, if you talk with any group of folks that are living with sickle cell disease, one large complaint they'll come back with is that quite often when they go into a hospital for treatment of pain, they are looked upon as somebody just looking out for pain medication as opposed to needing to treat their pain caused by sickle cell disease. And so they don't always feel as though they're properly respected when they do show up at an ER or somewhere for medication or treatment. But pain can be excruciating with sickle cell disease, and I'm sure our guests will be able to speak on
we hear about that
on that issue a little further.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it's treating pain, and for many years, that's the only option that doctors really had for managing sickle cell disease, is just treating the pain.
Okay, so let's follow up on that one. Is there a cure on the horizon?
On the horizon, there are many exciting options. We don't know which one will finalize as the cure, but we do believe that we're right at that precipice where effective treatment will cure sickle cell disease. There are a number of new treatments that are both in development, as well as the exciting option of gene therapy, which I have long since held the belief that that's where the real answer is going to come from.
Now, is that gene therapy, is that the same as gene replacement therapy? Is it the same thing? Am I confusing myself?
It's fundamentally the same concept. With gene therapy, and that is just as opposed to drug therapy, we're not going to try to give you a medication or something that will mask the symptom of the problem. We're actually looking at going into the gene, targeting the cells that produce red blood cells, and correcting the error that is sickle cell disease. And if we can effectively do that without other complications, and that's what researchers today are working very effectively on, and so we don't have anything we could point to today and say, yes, we have that cure today. We kind of sort of have something we think will end up being that cure, but it's got to be tested.
I want to invite our two guests to join our discussion. I know you have lots of questions. I saw you there shaking your head, but I also want to hear your story. Kamara Jackson, we've met before.
Yes, yes.
You're the founder of the Elite Learners.
Yes.
What is it? What is Elite Learners?
Elite Learners is a community-based organization that provides a variety of wraparound services and after-school programs to youth.
And how long have you been working with your organization, Elite Learners?
Elite Learners has been established for the past 3 years, but I've been in the education field. So.
Okay. And Felicia Cooper.
How you doing?
An old student. How are you? Good to see you again.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. You're a caseworker at a men's shelter.
Yeah.
Tell us about that briefly before we get to hear your story.
I work with MICA men, which is mentally ill, chemically addicted men. It's a shelter with 200 men, and I service about 18 to 20. So.
Since you're the last person to speak, let's hear from you first. Your experience. You have sickle cell disease. Mm-hmm. In our conversation before we started, I was very leery about calling sickle cell a disease. Mm-hmm. But I'm told that it is. Mm-hmm. What's your history?
I have sickle cell disease SC, which is more of a rare type. They like to call it the good kind. I don't know if there is such a thing as a good kind and a bad kind, but I guess it may be considered somewhat less severe than SS. So, I mean, in my opinion, it's still bad because the pain is still excruciating, but I mean, I may not get sick as much as a person with SS.
How often do you get sick?
Fortunately, I have gotten sick. I got sick last year, maybe twice. One serious crisis where I was hospitalized for like 10 to 11 days. Prior to that, maybe like once the year before, and then I went like a stretch of like 5 years without getting sick. Like, and when I say sick, I don't mean like not having a crisis at home, but like sick enough to have been like hospitalized. So, I mean, my crises are usually manageable at home, but yeah, last year it wasn't.
What's the difference between SC, sickle cell SC, and sickle cell SS?
Okay, very good question. As I started, we talked about malaria and how we adapted as a population to malaria. Well, it wasn't just one adaptation in one spot. Many populations came up with solutions. There are at least 5 different sickle type genes, and then at a point we believe that evolved after the sickle genes, there was a type C gene, which together, 2 C genes, the disease condition hemoglobin C disease, is much milder than hemoglobin S disease. So we believe it evolved within the same populations, but evolved after the S type, which worked, but had the drawback of sickle cell disease, SS type disease. But now, if you had 2 C parents come together and produce a child, still the 1 out of 4 math that's underneath all of it, but that 1 out of 4 chances for hemoglobin C disease, which is not as lethal as type S disease could be. So then we believe populations evolved with the type C gene. Now you have populations that have the normal type A, populations that have sickle cell trait, and populations that have type C trait, AC. And you can get any combination therein. So if one parent has sickle cell trait, 1 normal gene, 1 C gene, and that's 1 normal gene, 1 S gene, and another parent with hemoglobin C trait that has 1 normal gene and 1 C gene, they can produce 1 out of 4 chance sickle C disease with a child. So SC is kind of a evolutionary step that is a bit milder, but in some cases, as she said, can be just as severe, but overall, statistically, it's a milder class of sickle type disease.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Tamara?
Yes. So I have SS, born with it. It's been a struggle all my life. Okay? Pain crisis every day.
Every day.
Every day. Just pain is more manageable at home at times versus times having to go to the hospital, right? I've been through everything from exchange blood transfusions to acute chest syndrome, and it's just been a struggle. It's been a struggle. It's been a struggle. The change in the weather this time of the year is hard on your body. Okay, the pain is such where you can't describe it. You don't know where it's going to come from, when it's going to come, or what it's going to feel like.
So Felicia, you said you have these crises like once a year.
Yeah, well, so when I was younger, I had crisis like often. And I had a doctor called Dr. Miller in Kings County who told me that the type of sickle cell that I had, I would technically outgrow it in a way. So when he said outgrow, I meant like, I asked him, like, do you mean I'm going to be cured? And he was like, no. However, once you become a teenager, you should see less and less crisis. At the time, I didn't believe him because I was always sick. Like, you know, I spent plenty of holidays, I'm sure you probably have too, in the hospital. Like, you know, my childhood I was always sick. So then I did notice that, like, by the time I hit 14, I would say that the crisis did minimize. However, they also changed. So I started to get different problems. Like, I got gallstones, had to get my gallbladder removed. Then I got like pneumonia, which was more popular for me. So like I would get pneumonia like maybe like this year, then like 2 years later. And then supposedly once you get it, you're like more susceptible to get it again. So I got it a few times in my life. But also that was partially my fault. Once I noticed what I was doing wrong, like I stopped doing it and then I stopped getting it. like teenagers think they're cute. We wear like jackets, you know. You go outside, you want to be like everybody else, but you're not like everybody else. And that's one thing that I heard my whole life, which I hated. You're not like everyone else. So if your friend could wear a flight jacket when it's 50 degrees outside, you have to wear a bubble coat. And I hated that, but that's just what it was. So.
Kamara, you're shaking your head.
Yeah. It is true. You do learn as you get older how to deal with the illness more. You know, you pick up little strategies to help you along the way. But what I do find, I mean, for me, is I know how to manage better. But the pain at a later age it's in different areas, right? So crisis within the lungs, right? I didn't experience that as a child. It was more so my joints, where with knees or elbows, right? And now a lot of the pain is the lung area. So, and you know, and that the weather does play, and how you dress, and just how you take care of yourself, right? It plays a part. But at the end of the day, you have the disease, and it's nothing you can do to shake it.
You said the weather does play part. You're talking about hot weather or cold
Both.
weather?
Hot weather, you have to stay hydrated, right? If it's hot and you're dehydrated, your joints, they cramp, right? They ache. It's a lack of oxygen flowing to the bones. So you get that dehydration, you start to cramp. Cold weather, you're cold, and the cold air brings upon the same type of lack of oxygen to the bones. So you don't win for lose, whether it's hot or whether it's cold.
How does this affect your relationships? And I'm not talking mom and dad.
Yeah.
I'm talking about your relationships with the opposite.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, it's my story, right? So I tell it. I can meet you, and that's one of the first things I say to you, because you see it. And if you don't see it now, you're going to see it at some point.
But we can't see it. Looking at you, we don't see it. You don't look any different.
Well, there's times your eyes get really yellow, right? The jaundice in the eyes. So many times I've had people look at me and take a second look, right? And then if I'm up against a green screen or anything like that, you know, it's a reflection. So there are times where you do see something, right? You may not be able to identify it's sickle cell disease or it's SS, you know, but you see that there's some type of discomfort.
For me, I don't feel like it affects relationships. I feel like I'm very upfront with it. Like back when I was younger, I felt like I used to somewhat hide it, but like you said, like you can just look at someone and see, I mean me at least, like when I looked at you, I can see your eyes, but that's because I know. But a normal
I don't see anything in her eyes.
Yeah, see, a person like you know, like I remember being very self-conscious about my eyes growing up. Like I never wore white, like never. Like the reflection, and then my teeth, people always say, oh, your teeth are so white, and I'm like, like let me stop smiling because it'll bring out the yellow in my eyes. So now as I got older, I don't know if it's because I take care of myself differently than I did before, but my eyes aren't as yellow. Like I don't go anywhere without my bottle of water. Like if you see me, you see my bottle of water. So even if I go to a party and I drink, I mean, I'm drinking water afterwards. So I mean, water is like my best friend. I can't survive without water. And I noticed that the more water I drink, the less my eyes were yellow. So I don't know, like I'm like a fish.
So they have strategies for how to conduct their lives with an understanding of their underlying disease condition. And that's how they are able to perform. And they've had excellent medical doctors that work with them at teams at both Brookdale and SUNY Downstate at Brooklyn. Dr. Miller, Dr. Viswanathan are colleagues and friends of mine. And I know they're dedicated doctors. Dr. Miller now retired, but during his practice. Very dedicated and excellent forethought, and Dr. Viswanathan equally so. And they equip their patients with a proper understanding of how to live with sickle cell disease. The issue that we have looked at over time, originally there was no real methodology to treat sickle cell disease other than pain medication. Over time, there have been things like hydroxyurea and other things like Indari, which came out last year, that have allowed doctors some more flexibility in trying to manage the disease and give people that are living with the disease a higher standard of living. Both of these young ladies had the benefit that research and quality committed caregivers have benefited them in their lives that allowed them to live in the way that they have.
We have 1 minute left.
Okay.
And I'd like to hear Kamara, 30 seconds from you. If anything you'd like to say? And Felicia, 30 seconds from you. Anything you'd like to
Just if you're out there and you're dealing with the disease, deal with it. Take care of yourself, and you can do anything you want to do. Don't let it stop you.
I would like to share that I do have a blog, and it's called F Sickle Cell at Blogspot, if I'm not mistaken. And I like to share my story with other people, and I like to hear from other people's stories and family members or friends of someone who suffers from the disease. And also, I feel like if you're a little girl or a boy out there that's living with this, I just want you to know that, you know, it gets better, hopefully. But, you know, don't give up. Always fight.
Felicia Cooper, Kamara Jackson, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank you.
story. And William,
Yes, sir.
you got 15 seconds.
Oh, okay, great. What we are excited about within the field is that there are new medications which allow better treatment. If we can get to younger people and deliver quality medical service and care, young people, these two being examples of how great your life can be, how fulfilling your life can be, we can only enhance that level further as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Millett. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Thank you, Ms. Cooper. We did say on Facebook that we were going to be taping this program. We've had lots of responses asking us to let people know when it's going to be broadcast.
Yes.
And if you're watching this program right now, you can check us out on our Facebook page. This program will also be on YouTube. On behalf of our Brooklyn 45 team, I'm Sam Tate.